All right, so hi everyone. I want to thank you all very much for joining us here today. My name is Saranya Yogarajah, and I'm here on behalf of the Toronto Risk Management Association, or the RMA. The RMA is a global, nonprofit, member-driven professional organization serving the financial services industry. So in celebration of Women's History Month, the RMA is hosting a series of interviews with women in the industry, getting to know them both professionally and personally to help us all understand what made them the women they are today and why it's important for them to help promote other women in their growth. Here with me today is Kelly MacDonald, Senior Vice President at AON, specializing in risk and insurance services. Kelly, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's kick this off. So as part of Women's History Month, it's really important to bring awareness to the fact that there's very limited representation of women in senior leadership roles. I'm sure you are very familiar with that.
I am.
In your opinion, particularly being a senior VP yourself, why do you think it's important to have women in leadership positions?
So I think the biggest thing is it's perspective. All the studies will tell us that the more perspective your organization has, the more perspective or different viewpoints, experiences, the richer the outcomes are going to be. And I'll get some of the stats wrong, but I know tons of the consulting houses have done reports and research on what having gender equality, sort of at that C-suite level and senior representation does to earnings. So earnings go up, right? Companies do better. So, I mean, the stats are there, but again, just having that different, the depth and breadth of experiences by having, again, gender representation, equal gender representation, but also, I wanted to, obviously this is Women's History, we want to talk about that, but we also want to have, people from all walks of life, right? So really having that very rich, sort of group of senior executives is going to be very positive for an organization.
Yeah, definitely. I see that. What challenges do you think you have faced as a leader over the years, particularly being a woman?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them. I think sometimes it's maybe women do it to themselves, and then oftentimes, maybe it's the men running the organization. So I'll talk about the women doing it themselves first. Again, another study out there that says, if a woman is looking for another job or a promotion, she looks to have close to 100% of the skills sort of under her belt before she raises her hand and says, yeah, I'm ready for that. And then on the flip side with men, it's something shockingly low, like 10 or 15% of the skills, and they'll put up their hand. So, part of that maybe comes from schools and how we raise our children. And I think sometimes we talk to our children, we talk to our boys a certain way and our girls a certain way. And so we need to stop. We need to stop doing that. So women need to be raising their hand as early and as often as men do, and not waiting until they have sort of 100% of the skill set. So I think, that sort of falls to women to sort of step outside of their comfort zone, advocate for themselves, and really have confidence in their ability that they can do something, or quickly, sort of pick up the skills necessary for that role or that job. And when we take a look at sort of the leadership of organizations, and I've heard these conversations, I've heard these words from men in my own organization. Oh, do you think she's ready? Do you think she has the right experience? And I'm thinking, I don't hear you talk about men the same way. And again, very, very condescending, almost the way it's, the way we sort of look at sometimes women for roles and men for roles. And, we need to be thinking about, people without a gender lens and looking at them all sort of equally with the skills and abilities that they have, and make sure that we're looking for opportunities to promote women.
Okay, so how do you go about encouraging that in your workforce within your organization?
Sure. So one of the things that's really important to me is being part of our mentoring program, both formally and informally. So we run a mentoring program every year. It usually runs for 9 months of the year. We kick it off sort of February, March, and then it wraps up towards the end of the year. So I've always participated in the mentoring program because I think it's important. I want more leaders to do it. And then our up and coming leaders who are part of the program as mentees, the whole idea is that they're going to pay it forward as their career progresses. So I'm always part of the formal mentoring program, but I also do mentoring on an informal basis. And I also make a deal with all of my mentees that they have a mentor for life, so long as they'll have me. So even when the formal program's over, I'm going to continue to advocate them. But I'm very clear with women. You just can't sit there and wait for somebody to tap you on the shoulder. If you know where you want to go, draw out that roadmap, figure out all those things, so if you're here today and you want to be there tomorrow, whatever tomorrow is, whether that's 5 years, 10 years, the end of your career, what does that path look like? You can't just say, well, it's sort of hope is not a strategy. I hope I get promoted. I hope I get that new job. I hope somebody notices what I'm doing here. No, you got to speak up. And, so again, figure out where you want to be, chart sort of the activities that need to happen between now and here, and then figure out how to get there. And maybe you can get there on your own, and maybe you need help from others. But again, having a concrete plan as to how you can get from point A to point B, and maybe some of the resources that you need, or maybe some of the help that you need. And I encourage people to speak up. If you've done something that you're proud of, make sure people know about it. If the other thing I talk about is managing your internal stock price. So if you think about an organization, it's made up of a whole bunch of individuals. And as people progress in their career, we know this is what happens when you get to the top, because you only have one president and CEO, and you've got your leadership team, and it gets bigger up here. You're going to get to a point in your career where it's a really small number of people up there, and you want one of those jobs, and there's going to be a bunch of different candidates with different skill sets. What are you doing today to make yourself stand out tomorrow? And so that's really that internal stock price. So part of that is made up of, the sort of the day-to-day work that you do within your organization, the impact that you make. What are other things that you're doing? Are you being, socially aware? Are you involved in, charitable or philanthropic efforts? And I can tie it back to the workplace. So I'll give you an example. One of my mentees was quite junior, in the industry, and quite junior in our organization. And we're a big, like yourself, we're a big beast of an organization, lots of people in our Toronto office. And, how could she get some better profile? How could she meet some of the other executives within the organization? I said, here's something to think about. I said, we run something called the Fun Squad. And the Fun Squad does a whole bunch of things, including, holiday parties and summer events, but the Fun Squad also does a lot of fundraising. So 50-50 tickets, you name it, all kinds of things. I said, how many staff in our office get the opportunity to walk around and knock on every single executive's door, every single senior leader's door, introduce themselves and say, hi, I'm with the Fun Squad. We're raising money for the Hospital for Sick Children. Would you like to buy a 50-50 raffle ticket? I said, think about what that does. All of a sudden, they've put a face and a name to an individual in the organization. Now they're going to start to look out for you. Now they see that you're committed to, social activities. You're committed to supporting the firm. So those are the different things that you can start to do to manage that internal stock price and make sure that you're getting those promotions that you want and you're on that right career path. And so that's really critical for me and the women that I work with in the organization.
Yeah, that's great. I find it interesting that, you hear about imposter syndrome, and women really definitely face imposter syndrome. They don't think that they deserve to be there, which is so not the case. They just really need to change that mindset and let them know that they're just as capable of being at the table as anyone else.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Imposter syndrome is a big one, and you don't hear of men facing it. It's not to say that there isn't, a man here or there that feels that way, but that is largely seems to be a female phenomenon. And I'd love to tell you that I've never felt it myself, but I have. Probably earlier days of my careers, and I sort of had to slap myself on the face and say, stop being so silly, And sometimes, the way you do that is to you keep a personal brag book. Right. So, and really what I mean by that is just always be very mindful of what your accomplishments are. What are your professional accomplishments? What are your personal accomplishments? What are some of the other things that you do to give back to the community, or to, sort of to drive things that are really important to you, and maybe reflect back. And that's a good thing to do, if you're going into a review, or if you're going into a job interview, maybe you're moving to another company or looking to get into that next role at your organization, go through your brag book, right? And that's going to remind you of why that imposter syndrome really should not apply. And that it's going to fire you up for those conversations that will hopefully get you into that next role.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to just take a step back and just get to know a little bit more about how you became who you are. Is there any women in history that you always looked up to, that you really used to be a driving force in who you became today?
Sure. It's funny you asked that question. It took me a while to think about it. So I think about a lot of the women that, impact me today. My boss right now is a woman. She's spectacular. She's strong, she's smart, but she's sensitive and she really cares. So I absolutely look up to her. Obviously other women that I've worked with, within AON, women in my industry. There's some female CEOs that have just done, really tremendous things within their own careers, within their, within their own organizations. But if I really had to think back to, who that woman in history was that really made me the person I am today, it's my mother. She's in the same industry as me. She's a force. We are similar and very different at the same time. So, sort of that 100,000 foot, a lot of similar characteristics. Where we've taken our careers is slightly different, but within the same industry. But, she was somebody who has always had a huge amount of grit and tenacity. She fought her way up through the ranks, a lot, earlier than I did, so she had to go through this, in the 70s and in the 80s, fighting for those senior leadership positions. So just, listening to how she approached some of the challenges, seeing how she, really always advocated for herself, and really how she charted sort of her own course within the industry, and has had a phenomenal career. I think, absent having her in my life and just watching her career evolve, I probably wouldn't be sort of where I am today. And we, obviously I don't do any formal mentoring with my mother, and certainly we're at points in our career where we're both, very self-sufficient on our own. But again, the more I reflect back, I mean, that is the person who I probably modeled myself after more than anyone.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's great to have that role model in your life. Industry-wise, where do you see the changes going? Do you think it's a positive change with women in leadership and in growth? Obviously, that glass ceiling is still there for us to kind of break and shatter, but are we slowly, crawling towards that point?
It's a great question. It sometimes feels to me like 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah.
And I sometimes wonder why that happens, because I think we all talk about it. I think it's obvious to most leaders, male and female, that having better gender representation is the goal, is positive for the organization. But it's a lot slower than I'd like to see. And I'll talk about my own organization right now. And this is all, publicly available information, so I'm not speaking out of school. A year ago, we had significantly more females on our executive leadership team. And as a result of a retirement, actually 2 retirements, and a couple of other moves, we went from having, 12 or 14 people on the committee, almost half of which were women, down to the same number of people. And now we're down to 1 woman. And it's a bit of a head scratcher for me.
Yeah.
I have to say, it's a bit of a head scratcher. And again, I don't fault anyone, because when people retire, there's not much you can do. And certainly, I'm a big believer in the right person for the job. And I don't want somebody to slot a woman into a job just because she's a woman, or a man just because he's a man. They really should be the right candidate and have the right skill set. Mm-hmm. But in 2020, I'm not going to lie, it gives me pause for concern that, again, we went from having this a pretty good representation, down to a lot less. So, and I see that in a lot of organizations. That's not just the one that I work for. Mm-hmm. It is still, largely, the insurance industry is largely dominated by white men. And it absolutely needs to change, because it's not representative of our employees. It's not representative of our clients, and it's not representative of our country.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Talk to me a little bit about the work-life balance, particularly when it comes to having children, because I know, a lot of women, they pause on either their careers, or they pause on having a family because they think, there's a trade-off there. Obviously you have a family yourself. How did you find that balance?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people say that the whole work-life balance thing is a fallacy. That there's no way to have balance between the two. Yeah. I won't lie. I have suffered from immense mummy guilt. Since I've had children, and sometimes the mummy guilt is inside me. It's not my kids saying anything to me, but it's something that's sort of burning inside of me. The challenge is real, and the thing that I think some individuals fail to realize is something that we refer to as silent work. Mm-hmm. And women tend to do the silent work. And so the silent work with kids could be everything from the doctor's appointments, the dentist appointments, signing the permission forms, parent-teacher interviews. Girls like to have their mom do their hair. And so even with, the most wonderful partner, more of that silent work, for whatever reason, tends to fall to the women, and it's not often accounted for. So I don't really know how to solve the silent work problem. I mean, maybe it's a thing that couples work out between the two of them, but it definitely is challenging. Even with sick days too, when I look around the office and our colleagues, when a child is sick, it's usually the mom that goes home to get them, regardless of how senior the woman is in the organization. The schools tend to call the moms first. And I only know that from personal experience, because when I would get the call and I'd call my partner and say, did you get a call? And he'd be like, nope. Like, great. So they'd always go. So maybe the schools are kind of reinforcing the gender roles as well. So it is an issue. I actually had this conversation. I have a mentee right now. She is going to get married. She was supposed to get married this year, obviously pushed out because of COVID. Right. And I said, let's have a talk about babies. And I said, I'm not talking to you as a senior vice president at AON. I said, I'm talking to you as your mentor who wants to make sure that you are set up for as much success as possible. And here's some things that you need to think about vis-a-vis your career and your family so that you get what you're looking for. So if you're looking to have kids and looking to have a career, which you probably are, let's talk about what that looks like and talk about some of the things that you can do to stay relevant, because 12 months out of the workforce is a really long time. And so I think it's incumbent on both the mom as well as the employer to figure out, how do we bridge those gaps so that when Kelly has a baby and she's out of the workforce for 12 months, she really hasn't lost 12 months of her career. There's got to be something that we can do. And I'm not saying it doesn't come without effort. I can't just expect to have a baby, not do any work, not stay current on what's going on in my industry, and not to have fallen behind some of my other peers, men or women, who've not had that time off. But I can't imagine that we can't find some way to make it easier for women to have children and come back to the workforce and not feel like they've lost that 12 months. I didn't personally love mat leave. I love my children. I just didn't love sort of the whole idea of mat leave. I did 8 months with my first daughter, and hopefully my youngest never watches this video, because I only took 12 weeks with her, and I'm sure she'll be in therapy if she hears that. No, I was lucky. I had a great employer, and I was able to work a lot of that time from home and had a great nanny, so we were able to balance that. But for me, that was important to me, and having my kids so closely together, I didn't want to be out of the workforce that long. I did feel like it was going to be impactful in a negative way. But yeah, the challenge is real. I don't think there's a simple answer to it. I think it's a problem best solved by the women themselves, with their families and with their employer. To, again, how do we figure out a way for you to feel supported in having children, both in the time you take off when you're on maternity leave, and then, having your career and still, doing the responsibilities that you have as part of a family unit.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Yeah. Just definitely to bridge that gap, there has to be something.
For sure.
So final question for you. This is a great conversation so far. I love that notion of building folks up to look at things with a neutral gender sort of perspective, like genderless. Yeah. What are some of the characteristics that you think a good leader has or should have, regardless of gender?
Great question. So often we try to recruit people that look like us, whether it be physically or whether it be that share the same values, because that's easy. When you meet somebody, you're like, oh, that's my person. They're my people. We have the same political views. We have the same world views. We have the same this view, the same that view. That can feel really easy. Like, oh, I want that person on my leadership team. I want that person as part of my team. And it's not to say that we don't want some of those people, but we also want those people that are different from us, because they're going to challenge us. They're going to have a different set of views. They're going to have a different set of experiences. So I and all leaders out there, we should be recruiting like a mosaic of people, right? And so, obviously there have to be enough similarities so the team can function together. But you also need that culture of, I want you to speak up. And I'll give you an example. I had a situation at work. It happened to me personally. It was about 3 months ago. It was pretty disturbing for me at the time. And I had to make a choice as to whether I was going to speak up and sort of maybe suffer some of the potential consequences of speaking up and using my voice, or being quiet, and what would the sort of that impact to me and also maybe other women in the organization for being quiet. So, you know, I had to do some soul searching on that, decided that I would speak up and use my voice. And so I had a phenomenal conversation with our Canadian president. He's very new into the role, is doing an exceptional job. And, you know, I had to have a very honest conversation with him about something that had occurred, not with him, with somebody else in the organization. And like I said, it, you know, could have gone one of two ways. And I was lucky that, you know, he stopped me and looked me square in the eye and said, thank you for using your voice. Thank you for speaking up. I know that was difficult. You know, I know that it was not without risk. Yeah. And I applaud you for doing it. And I want you to keep doing it. And I want you to encourage more people to do it, because that's the only way we're going to get better. And if everyone's always sort of patting me on the back and telling me that I'm doing such a great job and not letting me know when there are challenging situations in the organization out of fear of some kind of retribution, he said, that's not good for any of us. So leaders need to be open to feedback, you know, constructive. You know, people on my team need to be able to tell me from time to time, I think you're out to lunch. Like that makes no sense. Yeah. You need to create a culture where using your voice is expected and encouraged, again, as long as it's done in a, you know, professional way. That's what good leaders are going to do. Also be empathetic, you know, be a good listener, and look for ways to draw out those special characteristics that are within each person on your team, because I tried to build a, you know, a team of people with different skills. I don't want a bunch of people like me, because we just drive each other crazy. Yeah. You know, I might want one or two people like me because we're going to do a certain set of things, but I want a whole bunch of people that aren't like me. They're going to be really good at all the things that I'm not good at. And I think, you know, a big thing for leaders, male or female, is what are your limitations? Like, have an honest conversation about what you're not good at. Yeah. And people are very uncomfortable doing that. Very, very uncomfortable. We love those reviews where it's like, oh, you're perfect. That was so great. Carry on. Well, that might feel nice in the moment, but it certainly doesn't help me grow, you know, as an individual contributor, and doesn't help me grow as a leader. So, you know, I think it's critical to have, you know, to have that kind of conversations and have that kind of culture within your organization. Yeah, I don't think you can really grow if you have the same perspective or same outlook as everyone else, because there's nobody challenging you, right? Yeah. Yeah, and you talk about growing. If I could just use a quick analogy, I like to use the example of, you know, going to the gym. Like, if you want to get in shape, you can't just get a gym membership and hope everything happens. You got to go, you got to get on that treadmill, you got to lift those weights, and guess what? It's going to hurt. Yeah. It's going to hurt. Yeah. The more it hurts, the better the outcome. And so, you know, you need to have a little bit of hurt in your sort of your professional career. I don't mean that in an unkind way, but, you know, people need to let you know what your strengths and your weaknesses are, and for you to be able to work on those and become a better version. And I always say to people, it's not about changing you. I want you to be the best version of yourself. Right, right. Do you think you have to just get comfortable with being uncomfortable to a degree? Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And you need to be able to say to people, like, if I'm not doing something well, just tell me. I always say we're not doing anyone any favors by not telling them the truth. Again, in a management and leadership role, you've got to do it with kindness and with respect, because you don't want to crush somebody. Yeah. But you don't want somebody looking at you 10 years down the road and saying, geez, if you just told me, Kelly, that this was an area of weakness that was easy for me to fix, I could have been so much further ahead in my career. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Awesome. So, this was an amazing conversation. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. This was just great for me as well. For sure.